Hello, and welcome to the channel. I'm back from my post-art fight induced coma. Yay! I was supposed to post this video last week, but I sort of decided to rewrite the whole script. So yeah, that's why this video is kind of off schedule. Anyway, enough whining. Today, I'm back with the Genshin Pets as Human series. If you've missed any of the previous videos, fret not, I have left a link to the playlist in the description. I was gonna add one in the annotations, but that would incentivize viewers to click off the video and ruin my watch time. We finally got to an outline, guys! Isn't that great? I'm so glad that there are so many pets in this nation and that we're not slowly running out of designs. I wonder who we're starting with. Sharky Surfboard is, as its name would imply, Mualani's surfboard. Makes you wonder why I chose it, since it's an inanimate object. I thought it was an actual shark, shaped like a surfboard. It's actually the other way around. In my defense, it bites people. Normal surfboards do not do that. Since I was fully committed to giving this thing a design, I went all in as usual. And by usual, I mean I stole some of the male NPCs from the People of the Spring's entire trip. Listen, I was going for a surfer dude vibe, and they all had the perfect outfits. I gave him a mohawk to reference his dorsal fin, and turned the markings on the surfboard into tattoos. I gave him a shark tooth necklace because that was the most obvious surf bro accessory, especially for a shark-themed dude. Following what I'd done for the Furina special, I drew Human Sharky and Sharky Surfboard together. Since giving the human surfboard a surfboard would have been redundant, I took a page from Child and decided he'd surf without it like a true pro. Since Mualani had waves in her splash art, I figured it would work just as nicely. What I failed to realize was that I was not drawing splash art and that I was straying from the usual illustration format of these videos. Once I realized what I was doing, I just kept going because I really wanted to draw those waves. When I got to the line art, I struggled with his hands for so long that I ended up just giving up and straight up just went to bed. Why are these things so hard to draw? Future me came in clutch row. Thanks, girl. I feel like the illustration doesn't really showcase the personality I had in mind for him. So I shall do the cardinal creative sin of telling instead of showing. Human Sharky is the type of guy who cannot stay out of trouble. Do not take this man to a bar. He will start a fight for fun. Only reason he doesn't is that he's too busy following Mualani around and helping her out because he likes her vibe. I imagined that one day she asked him for help, but made it into a challenge. And he really got into it and kept coming back to help her until they kind of just became friends. Back to the design. I changed a few things here and there, like some of the patterns on his pets. I added some red markings to them to make gills, and also add a splash of color, but it's not all that visible looking back at it. Once I was done with both Sharkies, I could finally draw the wave. I'm not gonna lie, this was the most fun part of the drawing. I always like trying to make Genshin style of drawing elements. It's something I don't do very often in my own art, so it feels like a cool exercise. Oh, and I also added a blue sky in the background rather than the usual colorful square. And here's the final design. I'm pretty happy with how the whole thing looks, but for the rest of the human designs, we're going back to the usual format. Here he is with his favorite gal, Mualani. Our second design is the almighty dragon lord himself, Ajaw, Kinich's Saurian companion. Despite looking like
all eyes are on me, lowly servants, behold, the almighty dragon lord's magnificence!
That, Ajaw is one of the 13 sovereign lords who once ruled over Netland thousands of years ago. A title that has given him quite the ego. His name also comes from the Mayan sun god, Kinich Ajaw, which did end up influencing his design just a little bit. Just like with Sharky, for Ajaw's human design, I started with the hair. I wanted something modern that would also be a good translation of his original design's crest, and after a few minutes of looking around, I found this specific hairstyle. Despite giving him a more contemporary haircut and keeping his sunglasses, I wanted to reference his status as a millennial relic and his namesake by giving him a Mayan-inspired clothing. I know he has an 8-bit thing going on, but Kinish is already designed with that in mind, so I wanted something more distinct. In a lot of my sketches, I gave him a loincloth and a cascamilt, which is this piece of clothing. I only kept the loincloth because it turns out the cascamilt was actually an Aztec garment worn specifically by women. Foiled by the power of research. At some point, I got the idea of giving him a top with edges that looked like huge zebra teeth as a direct nod to Kenich's design. The silhouette felt a little empty though, so I added a little shawl to spice things up. It also doubles as a reference to the cape that Mayan rulers wore around their shoulders. I stuck to colors that were close to green and yellow, mostly because I wanted him to look kinda gaudy. With Ahaw's illustration, I got right back to the original format. I wanted to draw him in the pose where he's kind of showing off, but it doesn't really read that way. I still like the pose though. Honestly, I don't really have that much to say about most of the process here. Wait, yes I do. Drawing Saurian Ajaw was a nightmare, actually. I'm sure there was a way to make it not difficult, but drawing those pixelated lines was so annoying. At least he looks cute, I guess. That doesn't make it better for me, but at least he's cute, I guess. I kept everything pretty close to the sketch color-wise, adding red to his shawl/cape to make it pop a little more. And here's the final design. I did go back afterwards and added some markings and a necklace to his design. I just felt like it was kind of a missed opportunity not to, especially for the markings. The necklace was kind of a spur of the moment thing. Here's the chibi version being very mad at a very unaffected Kinich. For our final design, we're pulling a Bogle Cat box and Green Malkin Cat and making two designs. Citlalin and Itzpapa. Two dolls that Citlalin crafted herself. To make things easier on myself, I actually designed them separately, starting with Citlalin is a pillow-shaped doll that Citlalin uses as a bed, a floating device, and a weapon. You'll notice their names sound very similar, and that's because Citlalin is just another version of Citlalin, which both mean star in Nahuatl. Given the similarity between their names, I decided I had to make Citlalin a girl. I had a very specific vision for her design. I wanted to keep the pillow shape of the doll's head, so I turned it into a hood. I also wanted her to look all bundled up since she wears a scarf in her doll form. Does it make sense with Netlands with her? Nope. But also, she's cryo, so it's all good. In addition to the bundled up look, I liked the idea of her having more of a shy demeanor. I wanted her to have long braids and a long dress and decided to use more traditional Mexican dresses as inspiration. I was going for something close to a China Poblana dress at first for the silhouette, but the end result is a little more ambiguous in its inspiration. For her hair, I added ribbons to her braids, something that was inspired by Oaxaca tradition. I didn't stray too far from her doll design for the colors, and decided since the doll was white, she'd have pale skin, which then ended up with me going, oh, I should totally make her albino. That would be sick as hell. For the illustration, I wanted a pose that was cute and showed off all the flowy bits of her design. I tried giving her a short sleeve during the line art phase, but ultimately the long sleeve looked too much to give it up. I did change her shoes though, I guess. Once I finished the line art of both Citlalin, I moved to the colors and changed her hair. The pale blondish shade didn't read that well, so I thought using gray would look better. Once she was done, I moved to the doll, added a funky little background that was definitely not too much and definitely did not end up needing to be redrawn. And here's the final design. I do wish I'd gone for a slightly more culturally accurate outfit. And I did go back in to change the colors of the skirt to match the China Poblana inspiration a bit more. I think it does look a little better. Itzpapa is Citlalin's second doll with a more shark-adjacent design and big googly eyes. Itzpapa appears during combat and follows the on-field character up. It's named after the Aztec death goddess Itzpapalotl, whose name means obsidian butterfly. When I started sketching out a human design for Itzpapa, I was basically going in blind. I kinda knew I wanted to turn the doll's head into a headpiece for the human design, but that was basically it. My first thought was to make it male, but when I looked back at the inspiration for its name, I realized it would make way more sense to make it female. I like the idea of her design contrasting with Citlalin's, so I gave her dark hair and some short braids wrapped in ribbons in the same shape as the doll's little tongue. I gave her the same swirly bang as Citlalin, just facing the opposite way, and I also added these little star highlights, mostly for flavor, honestly. For her outfit, I gave her a cascabel. Since those were usually worn with long skirts underneath in Aztec culture, I was going to give her a long dress. But after sitting on the idea, I figured a shorter one would add more contrast between her and Citlalin. Once I was happy with the design, I added the colors. Since Citlalin had pale skin, I gave her really dark skin. I also decided to add these little tails shaped like butterfly wings as a direct reference to Itzpapa. Just like with the initial design, I wasn't really sure what to do for the illustration, and I ended up redoing her pose a few times until I finally found one I liked. The big googly eyes on her hood ended up getting scrapped because they just looked too goofy. And I also hadn't kept the eyes on Citlalin, so it kind of made sense not to keep them here either. Besides that, things stayed pretty similar to the sketch, and I didn't really change anything major with the colors. I added Itzpapa's dual design and the background, which also ended up getting reworked because it was too flashy. And it was done. Here's the final design. I do really like how different she looks from Citlalin while still matching her. The butterfly wings don't really read that well, which I kind of expected. But you know, I didn't feel like scrapping them, so shrug. Here are the chibi of Citlalin and Itzpapa being clingy, while Citlalin is seconds away from back losing it. And there we go. I am so glad to finally get this video out. I don't regret postponing it to work on the script though. If you enjoyed it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the designs. And maybe a little like for yours truly. With all that being said, the next video in the series will be quote-unquote the last until we get more characters with pets. I hope to see y'all in the next video, which I'm not 100% sure what they'll be yet, but I'm sure it'll be great. Please subscribe and hit that bell icon. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye bye!